So mind you, what he's now doing is deriving the risks, again, from an agreement between the parties as to the fair quantities that they are willing to pay in order to get into this contract. So again, he's quantifying risks without plugging in any sort of probability. So you see, we have this principle of equality in risk, and we are getting to risks, we're getting to the quantification of risks through other means than probability. We're getting to risks through agreement between the parties about which it can happen to them, either with equal or unequal facility. And how do we know, how do we quantify this equal or unequal facility? Through prices. So the prices people, are willing to pay, agree to pay to get into these contracts. So we find here, the principle of actuarial fairness articulated as it currently is. Basically, same risks, what our principle of equality in risks says is that if you're bearing the same risks, you should pay the same price for it. Although these risks are quantified without quantitative probabilities on the basis of agreements alone, which is sort of counterintuitive from our own perspective. But here we claim this where the dream of an objective actuarial fairness was born. The idea that if we were able to quantify these risks that each one of us is undertaking in a sort of objective manner, then we will all reach a universal agreement on what the actuarial fair price for a random contract is. Okay, this is a sort of enlightenment dream. It starts in the 17th century and goes on for at least 2 more centuries. And to give you just a taste of how objective this dream was, how objective actuarial fairness was for these people, just recall, I'm just giving you here a quotation by the great Abraham de Moivre, who thought, that the risks are based on the laws of nature. These laws of nature are sort of grounded ultimately in the providence of God, in its original design. Basically, we should study nature and quantify risks in nature through frequencies. And through these frequencies, what we will grasp are laws of nature which are ultimately objective, because this is the way God designed our world to be. And this gave to actuarial fairness a clearly objectivist flavor, because the risks were just were just there for us to grab. They were recoded in nature in a way that with enough patience and attention, we could only agree in calculating. And this is what a number of people did, starting with, canonically, with Edmund Halley, who, in 1693, provided the first good systematic mortality table that I just copied for you on the screen, in which he tried to quantify, on the basis of frequencies, the chances of people with different ages of dying in a particular year, as you can see in this citation on the screen. Okay, then basically a whole cohort of statisticians thought that they could improve this estimate if they could only grab better data and treat this data with enough methodological sophistication as to render this calculation objective. Well, this is at least what they thought, because thanks to, I'm sorry, now he's not looking at me, but I'm going to talk to him. Pierre Charles, this is about you. So what my co-author Pierre Charles, or our co-author Pierre Charles did this summer was to study most mortality tables that we find all over Europe between the 17th and the 18th century, and see, how the life expectancy of people with a given age was calculated in each of them. And what you can see very poorly on the screen is the huge divergences that all these distinguished statisticians and actuarians came up with. Uller, Halley, de Moivre, de Graaf, Smart, I mean, they just couldn't reach an agreement on what the life expectancy was for people in each particular age group. And this was sort of crushing for, for these product statisticians, because like I said, most of them shared this intuition that risks were somehow objectively recorded in nature. And what they just needed was enough precision and enough data to grasp them objectively. So at first, they thought the debate was mostly scientific. It was either about methodology, or about data, or about both. But that's all they needed to agree on in order to reach a proper calculation for life expectancies. Well, fair enough. This is the sort of debate that you might find standardly recorded in our histories of statistics. But here, Antonio, Pietro, and I are putting forward an alternative account to explain in just the 3 final slides why actuarial fairness never happened. Because recall that for most of these people, most mortality tables were calculated with a goal in mind, which is to find out the fair actuarial price of either an annuity or a tontine or any other form of life insurance. So these tables were used in the marketplace, and they could be used for strategic purposes because, of course, depending on the mortality table that you have, you could calculate different prices for your product, as you can see here on the screen. Basically, what you see on the screen is how many years you should purchase at each age round for which you should calculate a price. And again, this is this work that we owe to the great patience of Pietro. And here you see an enormous divergence again. And this divergence in prices was sort of shattering for the idea of the actuarial price, the actuarial fair price. Because the beauty of this idea of actuarial fairness is that it should allow you to calculate one single price for each product based on objective characteristics of the product, namely the risks of the people who's buying it. And what we see instead is that this ideal agreement predicted by the concept of actuarial fairness did never actually happen. And we think that we can explain this agreement in terms of a very simple economic idea, which is adverse selection. Basically, this situation in which you find yourself, if in a market, a buyer cannot tell whether the product he sold is of good quality or not by just simple inspection. And of course, I mean, if you present these mortality tables to your regular buyer, I mean, there is no way he's going to tell who's right between all these people and who has the best table here. I mean, how can an insurance buyer decide between all these possibilities and all these corresponding prices? Clearly, I mean, there are lots of opportunities for people to cheat here. And Antonio, my other co-author, did he share here just contrasting how prices were distributed, so how risks were presented depending on the goal of each table. So Halley was not in any business of insurance or anything other. So he could just presume he was objective in the estimation of risks. Whereas Van Dijk was a Dutch actuarian who in the 17th, 18th century, was trying to sell tontines to people. And of course, in a tontine was more attractive, the more chances you think you had to reach a very old age. So what you see here in green is how, Van Dijk, exaggerated your chances of dying at an early age and surviving to an old age. So giving you the impression that if you made it for long enough, you would be outrageously rich. Now, if you contrast these with the red line, which is Halley's risk distribution, you can see that one of them was sort of cheating. And of course, this is only a matter of interpretation, but we can only suspect that the one who had more commercial interests was exaggerating on his side. But you could see a sort of reverse adverse selection on the part of sellers, on the part of buyers as well. And this is what Pierre Schall made us notice. How the bid, had been clearly aware that most people buying life annuities, were buying them, for their children, and placing them on the youngest and healthiest heads in their households. So that, of course, in a way that sort of betrays their expectation of getting as much income from the annuity as they could possibly have. So if you charge these people, the fair actuarial price, these young, healthy kids, you are risking, as a seller, to lose lots of money. And you can only make up for this risk by exaggerating the chances of these kids to survive at an early age. So this is what you see. You can trust Halley's sort of objective estimate of risks as opposed to the bid who had the commercial interests of the Dutch administration on his side. Okay? You see at the very first H rank, how the probabilities of kids to die differ between them both depending on their commercial interest. So basically, what we're claiming is that this concept of equality in risk, which was so intuitive, so easy to quantify, and available for us from the 17th century onwards, never took off in the sense that it never made actuarians reach an agreement on what the actuarial fair prices were in the marketplace, because this concept could not resist the corrosive force of adverse selection. Because the minute you announce your actuarial fair price, someone will cheat on you. Either as a buyer or as a seller. And this is why we never saw an agreement occur in actuarial fair prices. And at the point we did, and this was again Pierre Schall's contribution, this was due to entirely social factors. Because in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, states like Britain first and then France, understood that life annuities were a very efficient means to subsidize their debts. Except that now they wouldn't sell them at exaggeratedly inflated prices in order to attract buyers because they had no financial pressure from the war effort. So they could afford the luxury of selling these life annuities at very conservative prices, trading this conservativeness for solvency. Okay, we're giving you these life annuities, which might be not as cheap as others you will find in the marketplace, but these annuities are solvent. These annuities are surefire. And unlike these other products that you can buy in the marketplace and then find the institution that is selling them goes bankrupt. So basically what Britain and France and the other countries did was to issue mortality tables that were maybe conservative, but sorted out the problem of adverse selection in terms of the solvency of the issuer. Okay, this is my mortality table, and it doesn't matter if it is objective or not. If it captures objective risks or it doesn't. What it matters is that these mortality tables is backed up by the financial solvency of my institution. And that was the only concept of actuarial fairness that was viable. The actuarial fairness that was backed up not in objective facts of nature, but on the authority, the social authority of the issuer. Okay, so what we have seen here today, and this is my last slide, is that actuarial fairness originates in an old Aristotelian principle that was updated to cope with risks in post-medieval times in the Renaissance. Basically, equality in risk, the idea that you pay the same risk, you pay the same price for the same risks you undertake. Now, I have shown you how this equality in risk was quantified. First, without probabilities on the basis of agreements alone, and then with probabilities in a sort of objective fashion. But this objective fashion never took off because if you were in a marketplace selling insurance, there was no way for you to resist the corrosive power of adverse selection if you were a private company. This was only, adverse selection was only sorted out by the authority of the state. Now, where does this leave us? Well, here, I mean, I hope we can, in the discussion, share these intuitions or extend them a bit further. Basically, it's interesting to notice this sort of divide, conceptual divide that still exists in the world of actuarial fairness. So there are people out there, often practitioners, but some theoreticians as well, who are still thinking that there is one such thing as the objective risk, that with enough data we will grasp and that will allow us to reach some sort of agreement on what an actuarial fair price is. Is this the way ahead, as some claim? Or shouldn't we sort of resort to this other intuition that we find in post-medieval times, basically, the idea that what is fair in the calculation of risk is the agreement between the parties? We should wonder under which conditions an agreement about risks can be considered fair. In the sense that, in what sense we can consider that none of the parties is exploiting the ignorance of the other in their common agreement about risks. That would be one way of going, like preserving our Aristotelian intuition about what justice is and then focus on risks and see how can we shape this concept. The other way ahead would be to question more dramatically what equality of exchange is, what equality in exchange is, to question our very principle of justice, because after all, this principle of justice is sort of free market economy, so to speak. And this principle of justice somehow parasites on the intuition that many of us have that when we go to the marketplace, I mean, what we give should be equal to what we receive, independently of market competition. That there is some sort of fairness that is based on the quality of the things we exchange, independently of the circumstances in which we exchange it. And the amazing thing about the actuarial world is that it is the only field in which you see this old Aristotelian intuition survive. I mean, in every other field of economics, it has been simply corroded by standard economic intuitions. That there is no one such thing as an objective price. That objective prices simply are those that the market gives you at some particular point. If you accept this simple intuition, this is the end of equality in exchange. So these are, in our view, the two ways ahead in this debate, as illuminated from history, and I thank you for your attention. Thanks.